America business. I think I work for Transamerica.
You're right.
He has been in the ministry for over 28 years and has led First Baptist Church of El Monte as the lead pastor since 1981. He is also the head varsity girls basketball coach at Rosemead High School for the 12 years where he won 10 league titles and is the most successful coach in that school's history for any sport. He has great passion for public speaking and motivating others to fulfill their God-given potential. Help me welcome J. Gauthier.
Thank you so much.
I know what your designation was.
Thank you so much, Mr. Toastmaster and distinguished guests. How's everybody doing tonight?
Great.
Are we awesome? Are we ready for a great evening? I took a look at the schedule. I saw it was first, and so I said to myself, I better bring some energy. So are we ready to be energized this evening? Good. That's what we need. Because what a great lineup of speakers that we have and some great topics that we're going to be looking at this evening. This is part 2 of something I started a couple weeks ago, 90 Days to a Whole New You. Now, how many of us are ready to be a whole new us? Raise your hand. Some of you aren't sure. Some of you are raising your hand. If you were hesitant, you were honest. Because one of our biggest problems that we have is that even if we say we want new results, often we really don't. Because we're comfortable being who we are. And even if we're not happy with the results that we have of who we are, those results are a result of, I know I'm using redundant words here, but they are a result of the actions that we have taken all our life, which have brought us to this point. Some people will even tell you, oh, I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied. I want different results. But they're too comfortable, even in their unsatisfaction, to change it. And so the biggest question we're going to start with this evening is what I mentioned last time. Do you just want different results, or are you willing to be a different person? Because often we want the results, but we want to be the same old us, and it doesn't work that way, or at least it doesn't work for very long. So tonight I want to really challenge you to hone in, and we're going to talk about 3 things. Last time I mentioned that you needed to determine who it was you wanted to be. Maybe you're not that person yet. Find out how that person acts, how they live, what they do, how they respond, how they handle different situations. And if you need be, become an actor or an actress and just play the role. Until you get to the point where you're so used to playing the role that that actually becomes more of who you are. And so I mentioned that last time. And today I want to talk about 3 areas that are key in change. Actually comes from a Bible verse, James 1:9. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. We're going to talk about those 3 things tonight. Now, the first one is listening. And when it comes to listening, I can't help but think of a little story I was told just recently. Actually, at my office, there were some guys that were down visiting from Canada. They were up in the Winnipeg, Canada area, and they had come down. And we had gone to a gas station. We were out canvassing around, and we stopped at a gas station, and he asked me a very interesting question that I haven't heard in years. He said, where's the person that pumps the gas? And I said, what are you talking about? I said, I haven't seen one of those since I was a kid. Nobody pumps the gas here. He says, really? Nobody pumps the gas here anymore? I said, why? They still do that back in Canada? And he said, yeah, actually they do. They have a choice. Said, well, here you had to pay more to have somebody do it, so everybody was too cheap and the gas prices were too high, so eventually that just phased out. And he said, no. He said there was people up there, and he had actually had that job, and he was telling me the story about this couple that came in from the United States. They actually had come from the Michigan area, and they were up in Canada, and they had come into the gas station to get gas, and the wife, the husband and wife in the car, the wife never listened to the conversation. So he went up there and he said, what will it be, sir? And he said, fill it up. And he said, okay. And he walked away. And apparently the wife said to the husband, what'd he say? And the husband said, oh, well, he asked what we wanted, and I said, fill it up. And she goes, oh, okay. A little while later, the guy comes up to the window again, and he says, well, where are you headed? And he goes, oh, we're just going to do some sightseeing in the area. We've never actually been to Canada before, so we're going to take a look around and see all the sights. Can you recommend anything? And he did. And he left again from the window, and the wife turns to him and says, what'd he say? And he said, well, he told me, about some of the sights that were there. Aren't you paying attention? And she says, oh, I'm sorry. And then a couple minutes later and he comes up to the window, and he says, hey, I noticed that your license plate says that you're from the state of Michigan. I used to live in Detroit. And when I lived in Detroit, we lived next door to the meanest neighbor lady. She was the meanest, nastiest old bat you'd ever want to meet in your life. And so again, he walks away, and the wife says, what'd he say? And he turned to the wife and said, he says he thinks he met you once in Detroit. You live next door to him. So it always pays to listen. Who's watched the show Shark Tank? I'm sure you guys have watched that. I love that show. My son was telling me about that show, and I thought, what kind of dumb show is that? Until one day I decided to watch it. And there's one thing, have you noticed when you watch Shark Tank, there's one thing that irritates the sharks more than anything else. And that's when a person gets up to make their pitch, and the shark starts trying to give them advice, and the person just talks and doesn't listen. They don't pay attention to the advice that the shark wants to give them. They think they have it all down. They already have it locked in their mind. And so they start arguing, and what ends up happening? That person gets no deal. They get no offer. And what the sharks will always say inevitably is, if I'm going to work with somebody and I'm going to help in a company, I need someone who's actually going to take my advice and somebody I can teach and somebody I can count on to actually do what needs to be done. And because the person won't listen, they lose out. How often is that so for us? How many seminars have we gone to and we're all excited, and yet we don't really hear much? We hear a few things, and then we start taking our notes, and we start daydreaming, and we start taking our own ideas, working them out again on paper, just hearing a little bit of what the person has to say. Or maybe we'll just evaluate and filter everything through our own experience, even if the person might be an expert in the field. We've gone to seminar after seminar, and like I mentioned last time, it's kind of like a warm bath. We leave and we feel good and we're excited, and yet there's never a change. How many times have you met somebody and you said, hello, my name is, what's your name? And they told you, and 10 seconds later you can't remember. Why is it that we don't remember? Partially because we didn't really hear. What we were really doing was, during that time that they answered, we were processing in our head what we were going to say next. So although we heard it, we didn't really take it in, because true listening is viewing information with importance. So if we want to change and become a new us, then in the areas where it's very important, we need to truly listen. Think and Grow Rich will tell you, if you want to be a millionaire, find somebody who's done it, who's willing to teach you, and then, of course, what should you do with that person? Listen. Somebody will have made all that money, and then they'll be training somebody else, and let's say that person makes $35,000, $40,000 a year. I heard this once. The person kept trying to tell them the changes they needed to make, and that person would respond to them, the person that had gone from nothing and then had built a huge income and built a huge career. And the person who's making $35,000, $40,000 a year will look at them and argue with them. And will say, well, I don't agree with that. I think it should be this way. And finally, the person who built that up and made that money and made those changes will look at them a little rudely and say, well, when I need to know how to make $35,000 or $40,000 a year, I'll be interested in what you think. But until then, you might want to listen to me. when I was coaching girls basketball, we had won 10 out of 12 years. There's 2 years we didn't win. One of those years was because the girls just didn't listen. They started off, they were actually much better towards the end of the year, but a lot of them were young. A lot of them were freshmen and sophomores, and they hadn't played varsity basketball before. And so we were going out in games, and I was telling them what to do, and I was giving them exactly the adjustments to make, because I had been coaching at that point for about 6 or 7 years, had a very good record. And it's not that I was always right, but I had learned a few things over the course of that time. And so I would tell them the adjustments to make, and over again, they would go out on the court, and guess what? They wouldn't do anything I told them. They wouldn't change anything. They wouldn't listen. They thought they had it down. So finally, after about 14 games of this, and we're like 3-11 on the season, which is not fun, especially when you're used to winning, I sat them down one day, and I said, you know, your biggest problem is that it's not that we're not telling you what to do, it's just that you don't listen and you don't go out and do it. Am I right or am I wrong? And they kind of acknowledged and they said, you're right. I said, you guys just think you already know what it is that's going to work. Well, let me ask you a question. You're 3-11. How has it been working for you so far? It was at that point when it finally clicked. You know, maybe we should listen. In our lives, myself included and all of us, my dad's age-old wisdom that he gave me has really stuck. And that is that the greatest thing about beating your head against the wall is it feels so good when you stop. The time has to come where we look at ourselves and say, wait, okay, I may not be doing that bad, but if I want 90 days of a whole new me, what do I want that me to be like? And I have to acknowledge that maybe I need to listen from someone who's done something different to get the results that they have, because my actions have given me the results that I currently have. So that's number one. Quick to hear, really listening. Number two, slow to speak. How many of us have open mouth, insert foot? More than once in our life. It's something that we need to get over. It's better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Correct? All these cliche old sayings that I'm bringing up, but they are definite wisdom which holds true. Think and listen and don't be so quick to speak. Right after me. Jeff, are you right after me? And Jeff does an excellent job of selling to the point and teaching that. And the point of selling, of course, is buying. And how does that work the best? By actually paying attention to the person that you're dealing with and hearing what they have to say and knowing where they're coming from so you can make a connection there. Right? So you don't just spout off. One of the greatest things when you sit down, did you say you were also with Transamerica? Was that correct? Did I pick that up earlier? Okay. So when you sit down and you build rapport with a client, I used to sit with my son on appointments very early, and he was very good at it, and he would drive me crazy because we would sit there, he'd sit down with clients that he'd never met, and he'd just shoot the breeze for like 25 minutes. They call that building rapport. And so when you build rapport, I think, okay, that's great. We'll do it for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll get on with it. And finally, I'd be sitting there, and I'd be getting really impatient, thinking, when is he going to get onto it? When's he going to get onto it? And he'd spend like 25 minutes, and then the presentation would be really short, and the next thing you know, they're signing on the line. And I'd just shake my head like, what? I don't understand how this happened. But when you truly listen to people and see where they are instead of just talking and talking and talking all the time, and build a rapport with them and build a relationship with them, things start to change, right? Anyone here ever, maybe I shouldn't ask the question. Anyone here ever known anyone that's gone to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or something like that? Or as a pastor, I've been a counselor? You have a friend? Okay. When I've done counseling, you know my greatest asset in counseling? Because a lot of times I have no idea what to say. Listen. And after they've talked and spilled it all, I've hardly said anything, but they feel a whole lot better when they leave. The old joke, the counselor sits there, so how do you feel about that? And that's about all they say, right? Because the person's just unloading. And so we need to be quick to hear, slow to speak. Watch what we say. Think about what we say. A lot of times when I'm working with someone and I'm listening to them, they've created such a mess, and sometimes in life, or different things have happened, either they've created or other people have created, that I don't even know what to say. So I have to listen very carefully and be careful. You know, what you say can also be very damaging, so be careful. Quick to hear, slow to speak. And then this last one we're going to center on, and the last time that we have. Slow to anger. I cannot tell you how many people have missed out on some great victories in their life because anger has got the best of them. How many of us here have at least one thing in our life that we could be mad about? Raise your hand. That's a given. There are plenty of things to be angry about. How many of us have had at least one person in our life hurt us badly? Raise your hand. Of course. Some of it goes all the way back to childhood. Some of it goes all the way back before, maybe even before school started, and we can remember some of those incidents. And the things that hurt and the things that make us angry stick with us. But you know, if you allow anger to control your life, you will just relive the events over and over again. And you'll be controlled by them. And you will not become a new you, because instead you will stay in the past because of that anger that you'll have. Forgiveness may be involved, not because they were right, not because they deserve it, but because it's liberating for yourself. It's easier to forgive and to move on than to have it continually control your life and be bothered by it constantly. So slow to anger. A little story. He read in the bio about overseeing 70 plus advisors. There's an interesting story. When I was first introduced to that business, it was by a young lady who I had known about 15 years prior. She was in my youth group in my church. And she invited me to check out the opportunity with that company. And I turned her down twice because I really wasn't interested. And then the third time she kept bugging me, so I finally went in. So we started in business. My son started in business with me. We got going, and she was all excited. There was a trainer that we had who was training us. His name was Pablo. Interesting thing about Pablo is he didn't look anything like a Pablo. But Pablo, so one night, about 3 weeks in, she was supposed to meet Pablo early before a meeting at the office. And she was supposed to be there for the meeting later that night anyways. The meeting started at 7. And she was supposed to meet him at 5 o'clock. Well, Pablo got detained. And she got there at 5 o'clock, was wondering where he was. She called him and he said, I'm not going to make it there on time, but you need to be there anyway, so go ahead and stay and go talk to so-and-so. They can teach you some stuff and I'll be there later. Well, she got mad. And because of that, she determined all the dreams she had, everything she was going to build. She marched in 2 days later, took all the awards she ever got, everything, dumped it on his desk, and quit. The way our business works, those 70 plus advisors and everybody that's attached would all be benefiting her right now. Instead, she's working in a supermarket, bagging groceries, because she got angry because he was late. We got to think. anger sometimes really causes us to miss out on the greatest blessings of life. So to sum it up, I have 1 minute left. To sum it up, tonight we talked about being open to a real change. Not just saying it, but being open. And it comes with listening, not speaking so much, and definitely not being controlled by anger. If you do this and you focus on these things, you will be on your way to a transformation to a whole new you in the next 90 days. So that's my time. Thank you very much. Okay, so questions and answers?
5 to 10 minute question and answer.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
I do have a question.
Sure.
And it has to do with slow to speak. Now, sometimes when I may be in a debate with someone and I leave the debate not saying what I wanted to say, I relive those moments over and over. How can I overcome those moments when I'm by myself and I'm saying, man, I should have.
Well, that will also come in with controlling anger.
But, I wasn't in an angry state.
Okay, in that case.
Right.
So there are some times when, if you're prepared properly on a subject, when you can speak up faster.
Right.
But a lot of times people just speak to speak, even when they're not prepared, and then they misspeak. The reason I tied anger into it is there's been times in my life when I'm reacting and I really wanted to speak, and somehow I'm frustrated because I didn't get to, and then afterwards I realized I would have said some really stupid things. So then I'm thankful that I didn't. So if you're confident but that's why you need to really be sure of what it is that you're saying. What I really mean is don't just speak blindly and dumbly and then regret it later. Make sure that you're very well versed in what you're talking about before you just spout off. Okay? Anything else? Good?
Okay. Quick question. I have a question.
Okay.
How to deal with, I've been kind of like Larry. I've been in situations where, let's say somebody brought a undeserved criticism towards you, and that person did not necessarily address it with you directly. They were kind of like gossiping about you.
Okay. That would never happen, but go ahead.
So I had 2 situations. One is I actually stood up for myself, and I said that person, what was necessary to stop, and the person actually stopped.
Okay.
And there was another one that I said, you know what, I'm just not going to argue with that person. I just let him down. But that person did nothing, and he continued doing it, and it really impacted my relationship.
Okay.
It wasn't until I actually spoke individually to everyone that he talked to, and they actually realized the truth that it was gone. But gossip really damaged. It damaged people sometimes, even to the most innocent people. And what is the approach when it comes to gossiping? Should we speak up for ourselves? Should we just be quiet?
Well, you bring up a very good order on how you just really did it. So my advice to you would be this. First of all, go to the source. Go straight to the source, not necessarily, hey, let's take this outside in the parking lot, but go to the source. And I would take the approach, it's come to my attention, these are some of the things that you're saying and you're thinking. That's not where I'm coming from, so I wanted to know, how can we straighten this out? Why is it that you're thinking I'm doing this or feeling this way? Let them explain themselves. You don't necessarily have to go on the attack. Okay, and see, a lot of times that will take care of it. Just going straight to the source. Then when that doesn't work, because sometimes it won't, when it doesn't work, then exactly what you're doing. But again, how do you do it? So if you go to, let's say you go to Laura here, and you go to Laura and say, hey Laura, well, I heard that Joe came to you, and let me tell you about Joe. All right, this is why you shouldn't listen to Joe, because Joe is da-da-da-da-da. Then you're just taking the same low road, and you're making yourself look dumb. So what I would do is when you go to the person then, just explain to them, look, I know this is what you might have been told, but let me tell you where I'm coming from. I don't know what you might have heard. And don't sink to the level of the other person, because it just makes you know better than they are. Yes?
I do have one other comment, Jay, and I want to thank you for bringing it up, because it's something that really happened. I'm a father of 2 daughters, and we're talking about slow to speak,
Okay.
quick to hear. When my daughters were in their teens, they would say, well, now they would say, well, Daddy, we can talk to you about anything, right? Because I would not speak when they started to talk, because I could feel my anger boiling up in me, and I thought that if I said something right now, that it wouldn't be a pretty sight. So I would not say anything. I would just sit there and listen. And some of the things that they would say, I didn't want to hear, right, as a father.
Sure.
I didn't want to hear it. But I really appreciate the fact that you said that, you have to be able to listen, right, without commenting, right? A lot of people, I think, in reading the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, they talk about, how men are the fixers, and when women start to unload, the men just want to fix their problems, right? That was so true, and I want to get your comment on that aspect of it, how men can stop trying to fix the problems that they're hearing from their mates or someone else that they're talking to.
Well, the not talking very quickly because of the anger, I hear you on that one. There are times where you just have to shut and wait, because otherwise it won't be good. And if you fly right off the handle, they start telling you, you're like, you did what? Yeah. Then they'll never tell you anything again. So that's very good. And as far as the urge to not try to fix everything, I don't know. I'm still working on that. I'm definitely still working on it. Are we done?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Anybody else?
I just have one
Sure.
question. I'm currently in a relationship, a very long distance relationship.
Okay.
She lives in Japan right now, and it hasn't happened yet, but I can see some situations occurring when we're Skyping, when we're talking. We don't have a lot of opportunities to talk because the hour difference is hard. So sometimes, my solution was when we were together, if we're in an argument and we're just going back and forth, we need our space, and that space really helps. So it's 10 or 15 minutes, but just given how it's so few and far between when we're able to communicate. We send messages, videos, but to communicate is really hard. And when we might be in those tough places, how would you recommend? Like, I want to be able to talk to her as much as possible in a healthy way. When that anger does arise in such scarce situations and such, what would your approach be? Very good question.
We've been married 29 years, so I can answer this question. We were married when we were 5, in case you're wondering. But, and in 29 years, we actually got the greatest compliment from our kids recently, about a year ago, when our kids said, we were thinking back through all the years, and we can never, ever remember you guys fighting. Because we've really never had a yell at, that type of fight. Now, has she been mad at me? Of course. Have I been mad at her? Of course. And part of the key, maybe it's just my personality, but exactly what you were saying. If you're going to sit there and say stuff you're going to regret and you're really angry at the time, it's better to take a break and not say what you're going to regret. And then you think about it, calm down a little bit. And when the woman says, will you say what's wrong, and the woman says nothing, and you know it's something, just let it be nothing for that point in time. Because when she's saying nothing, you keep pushing and it's going to be something. All right, so just let it go until she'll eventually tell you. All right? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate it, man. Okay. So, thanks, Jay. Give him another round of applause, everybody. That was some very, very good something I forgot to mention, that was part 2 of his 90 days to a whole new you.